My boyfriend's closest friend judged me stupid, not nearly sophisticated. I returned the favor, utterly shattering her PhD career in just one short week. Can you imagine being told you're too stupid for the person you love by someone who claims to be their best friend? Well, that happened to me. And let me tell you, I decided that if she wanted to play a game of intellectual warfare, I was going to make sure she lost everything, including her entire PhD career, in less than a week. All right, so picture this. I was head over heels in love with Ethan. We'd been together for 3 amazing years. We met at a game night. Classic nerd alert, I know, and it just clicked. Both aerospace engineers, both obsessed with hiking, films, and the sheer wonder of building satellite components. He was consulting, I was in a research lab, and we had this incredible rhythm. We'd cook, chat about our work, help each other solve complex problems. It was just us. Comfortable, intellectually stimulating, truly a partnership. Then, Olivia waltzed back into our lives. She was Ethan's high school classmate, reconnecting at a reunion, and she was doing a PhD in theoretical physics. Instantly, she started tagging along to all our hangouts. I tried to be friendly, I really did. I'd ask her about quantum physics, genuinely curious, but she'd bat her eyelashes, explain it to me like I was 5, and then turn to Ethan with a simpering, "Wasn't it cute how she tried to understand?" She only did it when he was watching. I noticed. Dinner with us? The conversation would inevitably swing to her clever people stuff, as she put it, before she'd apologize for boring me. Hello. I have a master's degree. It was infuriating. Then came trivia night, space exploration themed. My specialty. I aced every single question. My job, right? Olivia, not missing a beat, leaned over to Ethan and said I probably just remembered facts without truly understanding them. And Ethan, he actually chuckled and suggested we give other teams a chance. That was the first crack. I let it go, but I started seeing things. Ethan began questioning me, things he never used to. When I fixed our router, a simple task for an engineer, he actually asked if I was sure or just lucky. When I helped him optimize code for his project, he took it to her for validation. She told him there were mistakes. There weren't. But the real gut punch came at Ethan's workplace party. I was deep in conversation with his supervisor, discussing propulsion systems, my literal expertise. Olivia, brazen as ever, sauntered over and introduced herself as Ethan's girlfriend, a lab technician. The supervisor, bless his heart, assumed I was the engineer who wrote the heat management study, a paper I was incredibly proud of. Olivia laughed a little too loudly and said, "Oh, it must be someone else with my name. That arithmetic was pretty sophisticated." She basically called me too dumb to have written my own work. I tried to correct her, but she'd already pulled Ethan away, leaving me standing there, boiling. In the car ride home, Ethan actually said that Olivia was concerned about our compatibility, that relationships work best when people are intellectual equals, and that maybe I could be happy with someone on my level. My level. I just stared at him. He stammered, explaining Olivia thought I struggled with abstract concepts, relied too much on practical application. This woman had completely convinced my boyfriend I was too foolish for him. I asked if he agreed. He hesitated. Then he said she'd made some reasonable observations about how our interactions were superficial. Superficial. We had just spent an entire week analyzing the philosophical consequences of sending consciousness to Mars. That was it. My heart clenched, but a cold, hard resolve settled over me. I knew exactly what was happening, and I decided right then and there that I was going to play the long game. I started acting confused. When Ethan explained things, I'd furrow my brow. When Olivia spoke, I'd ask her to slow down, as if her brilliant mind was just too fast for me. I even bought a stack of those popular science books and left them artfully scattered around my apartment. Olivia ate it up. They started referring to me as Ethan's nice, uncomplicated girlfriend. Meanwhile, I was working on something extraordinary. Olivia's doctoral supervisor was Dr. Fitzgerald. We had collaborated on 5 papers together. He had no idea she was Ethan's friend. I reached out to him, innocently, about a new project, quantum applications in satellite navigation. He was interested. We started working together. Olivia had no clue her own mentor was emailing me her research to review, thinking my practical knowledge would complement her theoretical work. And here's the thing about her research, it was derivative. She'd just repackaged existing frameworks with overly complicated math that obscured rather than clarified. Her code? Inefficient. Her findings? Not grounded in reality. I prepared a detailed assessment pointing out every error, every omitted citation, every instance where practical application would tear her theories apart. Dr. Fitzgerald was mortified that he'd missed so much. Then I found something worse. Whole paragraphs, copied word for word from obscure Russian periodicals. Not enough for a typical plagiarism checker to catch, but definitely enough to end a career. I documented everything. I emailed it to Dr. Fitzgerald, expressing my profound concern for academic honesty. He called me immediately. The review board convened that week. Olivia was called in, thinking it was about her upcoming defense. Instead, they showed her my findings. She tried to claim coincidence, but I had found 15 instances across 5 publications. Her funding was pulled. Immediately. She had 1 week to clear out her office. Ethan called me in a panic. Olivia was having a breakdown, screaming that someone had sabotaged her. She couldn't tell who. She'd alienated so many grad students by constantly revising their work. Ethan pleaded with me. Could I help her, despite everything? I said, of course. And I packed some cookies and tea. Her office. My God. It smelled of stale coffee and printer toner. A tiny closet of a room, crammed with disorganized papers. She was slumped over her desk, face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking. The tea I'd brought sat untouched. I sat opposite her on a plastic chair and watched her cry. My heart was pounding, a fierce drumbeat in my throat. She just kept repeating herself. Who would do this? The plagiarism results are impossible. I've never stolen anything in my life. I nodded, making sympathetic noises, my hands clutching my knees under the desk. Every time she looked up, eyes red and bulging, I had to fight to keep my face worried, not triumphant. This was exactly what I'd planned. Weeks of meticulous preparation. But watching her world crumble, it felt different than I'd anticipated. Not bad different, just curious. She blew her nose and started rereading the review board's conclusions. I leaned in, pointing at her screen, pretending to help her find a flaw in their logic. I was reading the document I wrote. She asked if I saw anything wrong. I told her they seemed pretty comprehensive. Her face crumpled again. My phone buzzed. Ethan. Has Olivia said anything about who reported her? He asked. I stared at the words. He had no idea. He was asking his fiancée for intel while I sat across from his friend, whose career I had just obliterated. I replied that she was too emotional to speak clearly, which wasn't a lie, and suggested he give her space. He sent a worried emoji. I put my phone down. Olivia was staring blankly at her screen. Do you think Ethan will still want to be my friend after this? She whispered. I assured her he would, that this didn't define her. The words felt hollow, but she seemed to find comfort in them. She thanked me for coming, for being such a great friend. I stayed another 30 minutes, making tea, listening to her lament years of squandered work. When I finally left, she hugged me, called me a great friend. The next week was a strange haze. Ethan kept updating me on Olivia. She wasn't returning his calls. He was so worried. He said she was proud. This must be hurting her. I nodded along, agreeing she just needed time. Wednesday night, on his couch, he brought it up again. Should he go check on her? I warned him it might make things worse. She was probably too humiliated. He nodded but kept checking his phone. Thursday, he asked if I'd heard from her. No. Friday, he wondered aloud if he should have seen the clues in her research. I bit my tongue. You're not a theoretical physicist, honey. How could you have known? He seemed relieved. By Saturday, he was asking me if she'd be okay, if academic fraud was recoverable, if her career was truly over. I had to sit there, pretending to be equally worried, offering comforting words, all while feeling this strange mix of triumph and guilt. The guilt, that surprised me. I expected pure satisfaction, but I kept seeing her face in that tiny office, the way her hands trembled. Monday morning, back at the lab, I was trying to focus. Julia, my colleague, found me pouring my third coffee. You okay? She asked, her eyes searching mine. I brushed it off, but she kept looking. You seem different lately, she said. More confident, but also more guarded, like you're holding something back. I mumbled about work. Then she asked, Is everything okay with Ethan? My grin froze. That question hit different. I hadn't let myself think about what all of this revealed about our relationship. Ethan had trusted Olivia over me. He'd questioned my IQ, my skills, my ability to grasp fundamental concepts in my own field. He'd done it so easily, so quickly. 3 years of knowing me meant nothing compared to Olivia's slights. I hadn't processed any of it. I'd been so focused on Olivia, I hadn't considered why Ethan was so willing to believe I was stupid. Julia was still waiting. I said, Things with Ethan are complicated right now. She squeezed my shoulder and walked away. That night, Ethan showed up with takeout. We ate on the couch, watching a deep-sea documentary. Halfway through, he paused. He looked at me, serious. He'd been thinking a lot about Olivia's comments on our intellectual compatibility. My stomach dropped, but my face stayed neutral. He went on, hesitantly, saying he was starting to wonder if he'd treated me unfairly. Unfairly? I asked. He squirmed, mentioned Olivia's observations about my difficulty with complex topics. Maybe they weren't true. Maybe he'd just been seeing what she wanted him to see. Rage swelled in my chest. A fire. He was only questioning his actions now because Olivia was gone, because he couldn't back up her story anymore. Not because he saw the problem himself. Not because he reflected on how offensive his behavior had been, but because his source of knowledge had vanished. Do you really think I struggle with abstract topics? I asked, my voice dangerously even. He paused, claimed he didn't realize Olivia had been persuading. The fire burned hotter. Do you remember our discussion about consciousness and Mars exploration? He nodded. Did it seem superficial to you at the time, until Olivia told you it was? He looked uneasy. He confessed it hadn't. I put down my food. I stood up. Where are you going? He asked. Nowhere, I said. I just need to move. I walked to the window, staring down at the parking lot. The conclusion formed in my mind, fully baked, as if it had been waiting there all along. I turned around. I need to tell you something. He put down his meal, sitting forward. I began to recount calmly how I had reviewed Olivia's research for Dr. Fitzgerald, discovered the plagiarism, and documented everything that led to her being kicked out of the PhD program. The words came out steady, clear. I told him about contacting Dr. Fitzgerald, about the quantum navigation project that was really a pretense to get access to her work, about finding the Russian documents. I revealed how I wrote the review that ended her career, how I was the one who reported her. Ethan's face went white, absolutely white. He stared at me like I'd just confessed to murder. The silence stretched eternal. Finally, he whispered, "Why would you do something so terrible?" His voice was low, but I could hear the astonishment, the raw disbelief. I walked back to the couch, sitting some distance from him. I reminded him of the router incident when he questioned if I knew what I was doing or if I was just lucky. The code review, where he double-checked my work with Olivia, even though I'd been programming longer than she had. The workplace party where she told his boss I was just a lab tech and laughed at the idea I'd written my own report. The car ride home when he said I might be happy on my level. I recounted every single time he had questioned my intelligence based on her lies. Each incident spilled out evidence in a trial. His face grew paler with every example. When I finished, he tried to speak, but I raised a hand. "That trivia night," I said, my voice rising, "when you agreed we should give other teams a chance because I'd probably just memorize facts." He closed his mouth, stared at his hands. He started to defend himself, claiming Olivia was compelling, had a PhD, seemed like an intellectual authority. I cut him off. Was my master's degree not compelling enough? Were my published research papers not authoritative enough? Were 7 years of experience in aeronautical engineering not proof enough that I understood abstract ideas? My voice grew louder with each question. Did you need Olivia to tell you I was brilliant, or should you have figured that out after 3 years of dating me? The pain on his face was clear now. He looked like I'd slapped him. Good. He was finally grasping the gravity of what he'd done to our relationship. He opened and closed his mouth, no words coming out. I waited. Finally, he admitted he didn't know what to say. Hearing it all laid out, he understood how badly he'd screwed up. "It wasn't just that you messed up," I said, my voice calm again but laced with ice. "It's how quickly you were convinced of my incompetence. That a woman you hadn't seen since high school could waltz in and make you question my basic IQ in just a few weeks." Then he asked the question that truly infuriated me. Was the plagiarism real, or did you make it up to hurt her? That stung deeply, that he still questioned my professional integrity. I had to take a deep breath. I stood, walked to my laptop, opened my email, and pulled up the data I'd sent Dr. Fitzgerald. I showed him the original Russian papers, side by side with Olivia's work, pointed out the similar paragraphs, the phrase patterns, the lifted formulas. I led him through the 15 instances, across 5 pages. I showed him how she'd changed just enough words to bypass automatic detection, while retaining the core concepts and structures without acknowledgement. I made him read the paragraphs himself, compare them line by line. I watched his expression as he realized her deception was real, that I hadn't made anything up, that I'd simply done my job as a reviewer and uncovered what was truly there. He slumped back, hands over his face. He apologized, said he should never have questioned if I was making it up. I closed my laptop. "The plagiarism was real," I said, "but that doesn't change why I went looking for it in the first place." We spent the next 4 hours talking. Everything. Ethan apologized again, said he had no idea how he'd let himself be twisted like that. He admitted he'd gotten caught up in Olivia's confidence and his own insecurities about not having a PhD. He'd always felt like his consulting job was somehow inferior to research. Olivia had played right into that fear. She made him feel like he belonged to an elite intellectual club by agreeing with her judgment of me. I listened. I tried to figure out if I could forgive someone so quick to dismiss me. Part of me knew insecurity makes people do dumb things, but another part couldn't stop thinking about how swiftly he'd turned. He asked what I was thinking. "I don't know yet," I said. I needed time. He nodded. He'd wait. We sat at opposite ends of the couch, the documentary paused, the takeout containers cold. I left his place after midnight, hands trembling on the wheel. The whole exchange played over and over. He'd looked at me as if he was seeing me for the first time in months. Back at my apartment, I sat in the dark for an hour, trying to digest it all. The next morning, I texted Ethan. I needed space to think about us. He responded instantly, asking how much time. I honestly told him I didn't know. That evening, he was at my door carrying 3 boxes. His face was pale, exhausted. He'd packed his things from my apartment without asking. His spare work clothes, his toiletries, the book he'd been reading off my nightstand. He moved slowly, cautiously. When he was done, he stood in my doorway, 2 boxes in hand. Is this what you want? He asked. I said, it's what I need right now. He nodded and left without another word. After he was gone, I walked through my apartment. All the empty spots. The bathroom counter looked larger without his razor. The closet had a gaping space where his coats used to hang. But somehow, the place felt more like mine than it had in months. It felt like I'd been sharing it with someone who didn't actually see me, and now I could breathe again. 3 days later, an email from Dr. Fitzgerald. He thanked me for my thorough review of Olivia's study, acknowledging my attention to detail had been crucial. Then, he mentioned that 3 other grad students had raised concerns about projects with Olivia. My examination had triggered a larger probe of her entire academic career. I just stared at the email. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction, like I'd unveiled something important. But another part felt terrible, because I was the one who started it. Would anyone have found it if I hadn't gone looking? If I hadn't been so furious about what she'd done to my relationship? I closed my inbox, but I couldn't stop thinking about how a single review had derailed someone's entire career. Friday, 7 p.m. Julia found me at my desk, staring blankly at simulation data. Drinks, she asked. I said yes without thinking. We ended up at our usual pub. Julia, seeing I was still off, pressed me. What's going on? I hadn't intended to tell anyone the whole story, but it all just spilled out. Olivia's undermining, Ethan's belief in her, finding the plagiarism, the academic probe, everything. I expected her to be shocked, maybe even criticize me. Instead, she listened carefully. Then she said, "You didn't manufacture anything. You just highlighted fraud that would have been uncovered eventually." She pointed out that Olivia's behavior towards me was its own form of sabotage, trying to ruin my relationship and Ethan's respect for my career. If the plagiarism was true, Olivia did this to herself. You just found it. Hearing someone else say it out loud helped. A little. The following Tuesday, Ethan texted, "Could we talk again?" He'd been thinking a lot about his actions, understood the problem wasn't just Olivia. He admitted he'd always been intimidated by my practical skills, my hands-on experience. That vulnerability left him open when someone came along and claimed theoretical knowledge was superior. He wanted to discuss more if I was willing. I stared at the text for an hour. Part of me wanted to delete it, move on. But another part needed to know how we got here. I agreed to meet him for coffee on Saturday. 3 days later, an email from Dr. Fitzgerald. He thanked me for my thorough review of Olivia's study, acknowledging my attention to detail had been crucial. Then he mentioned that 3 other grad students had raised concerns about projects with Olivia. My examination had triggered a larger probe of her entire academic career. I just stared at the email. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction, like I'd unveiled something important. But another part felt terrible, because I was the one who started it. Would anyone have found it if I hadn't gone looking? If I hadn't been so furious about what she'd done to my relationship? I closed my inbox, but I couldn't stop thinking about how a single review had derailed someone's entire career. Friday, 7 p.m. Julia found me at my desk, staring blankly at simulation data. Drinks, she asked. I said yes without thinking. We ended up at our usual pub. Julia, seeing I was still off, pressed me. What's going on? I hadn't intended to tell anyone the whole story, but it all just spilled out. Olivia's undermining, Ethan's belief in her, finding the plagiarism, the academic probe, everything. I expected her to be shocked, maybe even criticize me. Instead, she listened carefully. Then she said, "You didn't manufacture anything. You just highlighted fraud that would have been uncovered eventually." She pointed out that Olivia's behavior towards me was its own form of sabotage, trying to ruin my relationship and Ethan's respect for my career. If the plagiarism was true, Olivia did this to herself. You just found it. Hearing someone else say it out loud helped. A little. The following Tuesday, Ethan texted, "Could we talk again?" He'd been thinking a lot about his actions, understood the problem wasn't just Olivia. He admitted he'd always been intimidated by my practical skills, my hands-on experience. That vulnerability left him open when someone came along and claimed theoretical knowledge was superior. He wanted to discuss more if I was willing. I stared at the text for an hour. Part of me wanted to delete it, move on. But another part needed to know how he got here. I agreed to meet him for coffee on Saturday. That night, when I told Ethan, he instantly hugged me, told me how proud he was. He insisted on throwing a celebratory dinner that weekend, inviting friends and a few of his coworkers. At the dinner, without me even asking, he started telling people about my research papers, my technical knowledge. He named specific projects I'd worked on, explained why they were significant. It felt like a test we were both passing, him demonstrating appreciation for my efforts, and me allowing him to celebrate my accomplishment without questioning his motives. A few weeks later, Julia approached me at lunch. She looked uneasy. She'd heard something about Olivia through academic networks. Olivia had dropped out of the PhD program entirely. Not just a break, but gone. She'd moved back to her hometown in Ohio to work for her family's commercial real estate firm. Julia thought I should know, given how chaotic everything had been. When I heard the news, a confused knot formed in my gut. Part of me felt relieved. Olivia suffered serious consequences for her deceit, for trying to harm my relationship. She was exposed as a fraud, lost the career she was so proud of. But another part of me felt uneasy with how completely her life had fallen apart. I'd uncovered real plagiarism, shoddy research. That was true, but I did it with the intention of hurting her, because of what she'd done to me. The magnitude of her collapse, losing everything, having to quit academia, felt heavier than I'd anticipated. I thanked Julia, went back to work, but couldn't stop thinking about it for days. Ethan and I discussed Olivia's situation that weekend. I told him what Julia said, admitted to feeling awkward about it. He reiterated why I'd done what I did, how Olivia had brought the consequences on herself through her own dishonesty. But he also understood my confusion about being the one who started it. We agreed to keep working on our relationship, to stay together, to keep going to therapy, to build something more honest than what we had before. What happened had changed us both. I realized I was capable of premeditated retribution, of plotting and executing someone's downfall in a very intentional way. That was an unsettling realization about myself. Ethan knew he was capable of betraying someone he loved, not through purposeful malice, but through weakness and insecurity, by letting others distort his perceptions. We were creating something more authentic now than the comfortable rhythm we used to share. It was harder work, less comfortable, but it felt more solid, as if we understood who we were now, and chose each other anyway, despite our flaws, despite our capacity to hurt each other. The fatigue was still there, but so was something deeper,